I turned off news altogether.
I hate to say it, but I don't trust much of anything.
It's the rage bait.
It feels like it's trying to divide people.
If we got clear facts, maybe we can calm down a little.
NBC News brings you clear reporting. Let's meet at the facts. Let's move forward from there. NBC News, reporting for America.
A message from McAfee. Wondering why the post office is texting you or why you owe thousands of dollars in toll fees? Because someone's trying to scam you. The good news? McAfee can help. With McAfee's award-winning scam detection, it's easy to tell what's real and what's fake over text, in your inbox, and online. If they're
You want a free gift?
Seriously? If they're faking it, they're not making it past us. Get award-winning scam detection today. McAfee.com/keepitreal.
Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey. And folks, again, you know, if you've listened to this podcast, we are contractually obligated to mention Wicked in every single episode of the show. But we are now, a week to 10 days out from when it finally arrives, in theaters.
Yeah.
And Eric, I thought you might like to know what Universal Pictures is planning to do, because again, the Wicked train is coming into the station. I mean, what do you do? What do you do, when you can no longer talk about Elphaba and Galinda?
Well, what do we got, Jim? You got me intrigued.
Okay, you turn around and in kind of your Ariana Grande tradition, you sign a deal with Sabrina Carpenter.
I saw this, Jim. I was going to say that's Universal that's doing this.
That's Universal.
Okay,
yes,
go
folks.
fill everybody in. What's going on here?
Okay, Sabrina Carpenter has agreed to star and produce a new movie musical based on Alice in Wonderland. And what's kind of interesting is, I want to say this name right, Lorene Scafaria, I guess, is going to write and direct. She worked with Jennifer Lopez most recently on Hustlers. And to give you some idea about Universal's not kidding around with this one, the producer of this project is Mark Platt, and he's the same guy who, produced Weekend on Broadway and spent then the next 25 years trying to get this movie off the ground. Which again, the two films now are so big they're blotting out the sun. So it's like, yep, just as the Wicked train pulls into the station, the Alice in Wonderland train, they're laying the track. Okay, so realistically, what, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years down the line, we'll have to talk every week about what's going on in Wonderland.
I'm not too bad about that. Now, granted, this isn't, so that's open for anyone. That's not a Disney product, right? I mean, Alice in Wonderland can be anything. I'm sure there's some like stipulations that are IPs created from Disney that won't be able to translate to the book or so forth, right? But
it's so interesting you say that because, I mean, for example, again, yes, The Wizard of Oz, technically, the L. Frank Baum book is in the public domain, which, why, for example, we saw Disney do Oz the Great and Powerful and why Universal did the two Wicked movies. But at the same time, there are certain elements of the film from 1939 that MGM made that can't be touched on. I mean, for example, what's so interesting, if you've been watching the trailers closely for Wicked for Good, at one point, they show Dorothy wearing the slippers, and it's like, but she's wearing the silver slippers from the book rather than the ruby slippers from the 39 film. So
right, but you could use the ruby ones. They use that in Return to Oz, so they must have paid big dough for that.
That is my understanding. But also it was a gentler age. At that point it was like, I want to say that movie came out 85, and it's like the movie from 1939. Give us $1, you can have the shoes. It's like crazy. All right, well, anyway, folks, there we did it. we got the obligatory Wicked thing out of the way. And now the other obligatory thing. We have to mention our sponsor, which is, of course, the lovely folks at unlockmagic.com. And if you're planning a trip to Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World, please check out unlockmagic.com. Listeners to the Epic Universal podcast are saving upwards of 12% on theme park tickets, including getting discounts on those after-hours parties like Mickey's Very Merry and Jollywood Nights. So be sure and visit unlockmagic.com and save today. All right. So, Eric, you have collected some very interesting news this week for our Epic Universal podcast. And this story, boy,
it's been, well, we kind of talked about it a couple weeks ago, but it was more about, we're talking about Warner Brothers, where we're at with Warner Brothers Discovery. And it does look like before we kind of alluded that Comcast would be interested. Well, we know they're interested now because it looks to be like David Zaslav, which is the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, had a meeting with Comcast CEO Brian Roberts. So it does appear that they're absolutely interested. Did you see that? I think Comcast had hired pretty big firms in terms to like evaluate a bid.
Oh God, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. I mean, you don't do that, if you're being casual about this. And again, what I find fascinating about this is, I'm serious. 18 months, 2 years ago, was out in LA, and had a friend in the know just talking about the notion of if Universal and Warner's were to come together. And geez, now, but let's talk about some of the other players though.
Yeah, because I mean, and I've just listed a few. I've heard everything from Apple to a couple private companies, but I think the biggest one, and they're obviously looking at it differently than we as theme park fans, Netflix, right, is one that they've actually retained some counsel as well to do a potential offer. And I haven't looked at Netflix's stock, but from what I recall, it's pretty hefty. They can throw some money around. Now, Paramount has been part of it, but they've been rejected multiple times.
Yeah.
So I think we're all kind of like, and that's kind of like the streaming end. Both of those are big streaming factors. They're really looking at streaming, which Comcast has reason to look at streaming as well. But have you seen how they're thinking about kind of splitting the company up into different, they're not looking at the whole company, right?
Well, this is the thing, that there is a ticking clock, because supposedly by next April, Warner Brothers Discovery will split into two separate corporate entities. We'll have Warner Brothers and then Discovery Global. And that's again why so many of these companies are sort of laying more money down on the table and manning up, so to speak. I mean, again, the Morgan Stanley, the Goldman Sachs thing, to show how serious they are about this acquisition. Because I guess the interesting thing is when the company splits, that means that certain assets only go to the other company.
Right.
And so it's, if you're if you're a Comcast or you're a Netflix or you're Paramount, if you want the whole enchilada, you got to move now. And then you, after the fact, have the luxury of, okay, I don't want the asparagus, I just, all I want is a steak.
Right. But beyond that, even, it's kind of interesting because there has been a little bit of talks of like, well, we only want this part. Like we only want the streaming rights, or we only want like theme park, like the movie collection and so forth. So because I think Comcast has a reason to have all of it, but Netflix, I mean, yeah, you get the studio, properties and some of the IP for your streaming, but do they want the sound stages, like kind of stuff like that, where we know Comcast in a sense is like, yeah, because what'd you say? They're like butted up against each other, right?
They are. But the other thing, and just the cautionary element to this tale, when remember that Disney got in a bidding war for those elements of 20th Century Fox and had to keep bumping up their offer to finally close the deal. And Disney learned the hard way that for example, they put such a high value on the 20th Century Fox film library, only to then discover that for the next generation of media consumers, the kids who are watching, movies on their iPhones and that sort of thing, they really have no interest in black and white films, and you have this giant film library where it's like, yeah, it's in black and white. I'm not watching it. And, that's the other thing here. Warner Brothers has been around forever. Again, first sound film, the Jazz Singer was made by Warner Brothers. And, the whole notion, that I think the rules will apply there as well. It's like, yes, look at our giant film library, 3/4 of which the kids have no interest in. So,
yeah. Well, I think as theme park fans, still naturally, I'm like, all right, let's go Comcast in this war, right? I'm thinking we would really use some of the IP. It'd be really cool. Just almost the what ifs would be really fun. You mentioning Fox or 20th Century. I mean, as theme park fans, we're still paying for that, right?
Oh,
yeah. So let's also be cautious. We don't really want a bidding war. We want Netflix to be like, yeah, we don't want that. Apple, we don't want that. And Comcast maybe just to slightly acquire, because if it's anything like Disney, it felt like there was a lot of Chapek decisions that kind of got passed down to us. Even if I knew it was the Iger administration who bought that, but that was a big price tag that I felt like the theme parks kind of had to pay for.
Well, and let's be honest, if you are in fact subscribing to Disney Plus, Hulu, or whatever, you're paying for that as well. In fact, the annual bill just showed up today, and I was like, woof, but. I guess I better start watching that again. Yeah. So, and speaking of things, watching on streaming services, you have news about a set of documentaries you and I have been looking forward to.
Well, I was going to say, I think this is the third time it's been on the show. So, guys, look for the updated release in February when we do it again. But as of right now, okay. November 17th. So, just a couple days away, we should be able to watch The Epic Ride, the story of Universal theme parks on Peacock. So, so we knew this was coming. We knew it was delayed like twice. It was originally slated for July 24th. And then when was it? September? So we're way off.
We are, but at the same time, face it, this is the parent company that is putting out the thing about their big new theme park.
Yeah.
And you have to assume, that multiple levels of executives had to eyeball this before it was finally approved to go out the door. And I would imagine, that a lot of folks are like, hang on, hit the brakes. Did we say July? We meant September. Did we say September? We meant November. And I think, as you just mentioned, they're clearing those dates in February as we speak.
Well, did you see maybe what caused the first delay? I have a theory of the first and the second delay, right?
I have not.
Well, this was just released somewhat through the news circuit. I think Attractions Magazine might have said this, that they talked about the Dragon drone tests, and they're going to show that in this documentary about, we've all seen kind of the blurry photos of the Dragon drone in the distance that was supposed to be there, right? We've even had people kind of tip us off.
Let's be clear here. You have a family member that actually saw these. Gigi, right?
Go.
All right. Yeah. Go. Excuse me. Yes, Go saw them. All right. So, and she's got to be sleeping better at night now, knowing that, because again, she insisted you saw this and you'd nod and smile. And it's like, we're going to call the home on you now. All right.
That's it. So. Yeah, but I guess so. I'm thinking what happened was they probably had it advertised in the first time that they're out and about, and they were almost like, and probably had testimonials of people saying, this is the greatest thing. You'll see this. It really feels like alive. Well, they probably were tipped off that this might not ever happen, so they might have had to go and readjust it, right? So that might have been the first delay. The second delay, in my opinion, had to be based off Stardust Racers and lawyers were involved. Right, it almost was going to come out. Because you can't be talking up a coaster and then have just a PR nightmare to talk it up, regardless of it is, and then have that negative PR. So maybe they got all this stuff fixed. We'll see what kind of changes, but by our next show, we might we might have watched, or we might be giving you guys a new date.
There we go. But I think you might actually be onto something with the Stardust Racers thing. I mean, certainly the timing, of that does actually line up, and it's still tragic. But all right, what's next for news?
All right. Well, I think we touched base on this, but I have it was all over the news, and I think it's big news, really, is the Jay Stein, the visionary behind Universal Orlando. He died at 88, so sounds like a long, very, very credible, great life. But I figure we give him a little touch, and then I believe next week we might be able to do a little bit more of a deep dive.
Yeah, I mean, Jay certainly deserves to be celebrated. I mean, again, this is a guy who, just like Card Walker at Disney, it started in the mailroom. Jay Stein did the same thing at MCA and eventually rose up through the ranks and became, a huge power on the theme park side of things at Universal. And when you look at one of the point, Jay pulled no punches. I mean, we've talked on this podcast a couple of times about, the story about, Michael Eisner when he was still at Paramount coming over to eyeball the plans.
Allegedly, Jim, just allegedly, we threw that in there for you.
All right. Well, that's the thing with Jay Stein. There was no allegedly. All right. Jay would immediately say we were in the Frank Webb building. He asked a lot of questions, good questions.
And this was the color of his tie. It was brown.
No, that's it exactly. I mean, he for a lot of people, given how powerful Michael Eisner was in the industry at the time, it's like, all right, we don't talk about that. Jay would talk about that. But yeah, Jay also, had a great relationship with Steven Spielberg, which is how, for example, he got Back to the Future, the ride, and there were so many people who worked with Jay over the year, including Mark Woodbury, the head of Universal Destinations and Experiences, who, again, they wouldn't be in Orlando if Jay hadn't been persistent, and more to the point, if every time Lou Wasserman waffled, Jay was there sort of nipping at his heels like, no, we got to be in this space. We got to be here. But yeah, we will do on an upcoming episode of the Epic Universal podcast a piece of size about Jay's career, and that'll be coming up soon, folks. So hang in there, because this is a guy who we certainly deserve. At the age of 88, that's a life that should be celebrated, and we'll do that here on this podcast soon.
Yeah. And I believe there's a book out there that I have yet to get, but I think I might order this.
Jay Bangs. Yep. In fact, I'm looking at my copy right now.
Yeah.
So, I will be reviewing that when I'm working on the tribute. But before we do that as a feature, we have to wrap up the other feature that Eric and I have been doing for now 3 weeks, right?
It sounds like Mummy 3, right? Or
there
Dark
we go.
Universe.
Dark Universe. So when we get back from this break, we will talk about the Tom Cruise Mummy movie and why perhaps that didn't do as well as it should have. But before we do that, there's this.
Hello, I'm Chris Cox, and I've teamed up with Len Tester to argue before our judge, Jim Hill, as he presides over us on our new podcast, The Case For with Chris Cox. In every episode, Len and I will argue about the big Disney debates like park hopping, early entry, and whether churros count as a food group. Whether you're planning a trip or just love Disney debates, it's the perfect podcast for you. Search The Case For with Chris Cox wherever you get your podcasts.
This holiday, discover meaningful gifts for everyone on your list at Kay. Not sure where to start? Our jewelry experts are here to help you find or create the perfect gift, in-store or online. Book your appointment today and unwrap love this season, only at Kay.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. This Monday night, witness the end of an era. John Cena takes center stage for his final appearance ever on Monday Night Raw. One last match. one unforgettable farewell. Come celebrate the legacy of a true WWE legend. Monday Night Raw, November 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, only on Netflix. Be there for the moment everyone will be talking about.
You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
And we're back. Okay, on last week's edition of the Epic Universal podcast, Eric shared info that there's a Mummy sequel that Universal Pictures has in the works, and it's bringing back Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz to the roles that they played in those two Stephen Sommers movies, The Mummy from May of 1999, and then, of course, its sequel, The Mummy Returns, May of 2001. And I actually hadn't heard about this when Eric shared the news last week, so I did some digging down into the project. And Eric, what's genuinely kind of intriguing about this Mummy thing, which, by the way, likely to be in production next year and should show up in a theater near you, summer of 2027, is that the promotional team at Universal was very insistent that this next Mummy movie will be a direct sequel to The Mummy Returns. It's not a reboot. Not only that, and this is the really interesting part, this new Mummy sequel will then ignore any event that occurred in the third film of this franchise.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we're talking about The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, which was released to theaters August of 2008, and which I guess I can understand, given that in Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, the role of Evelyn O'Connell, Brendan Fraser's love interest and eventually his wife in the series, and by the way, female lead of the franchise, in that movie, she was played by Maria Bello rather than Rachel Weisz. And kind of an interesting little twist in the story here, Eric, as to why Weisz didn't come back for the third Mummy movie, and Rachel's actually been pretty upfront about this. She said, I read the script.
Oh, God.
And it was just one of these things. I didn't necessarily like the script, and I'd also just given birth to my son and just did not relish having a newborn, on location in China for 5 months. So the fact that she thought the script was kind of crummy, it's like, that's my get out of jail free card. Thank you. No, I'm not going to do this. Yeah. But now what gets especially interesting is prior to the release of Tomb of the Dragon Warriors, Universal was developing a fourth film in this series. It was tentatively titled The Mummy, Rise of the Aztecs, and the setting for this proposed sequel would have shifted to South America. And they were so far along, Eric, they were having conversations with Antonio Banderas to play the bad guy, Brendan Fraser, oh my God, another mummy.
Yeah. That's the fourth film though, Jim. Like, it seems, did they make that much money?
Well, interesting you bring that up. Okay, because, again, Drew Taylor has repeatedly schooled me in Hollywood math. but here's the thing. The original Stephen Sommers Mummy only cost Universal Pictures $80 million to make, and it then went on to sell $417 million worth of tickets worldwide. So that movie definitely made money for the studio. Now, Mummy Returns, that cost Universal Pictures a little more. It was $98 million, so roughly 20 more than the first film in the series. But because that sequel then goes on to sell 443 million worth of tickets, it too proves to be profitable for Universal. Maybe not as profitable as the first film in the series, but you get the idea. Whereas The Dragon Warrior, that one cost Universal Pictures $145 million to make, and then goes on to gross $405 million worldwide. And again, it's Mr. Taylor that's drilled this into my head, that you have to make at least 3 times your initial production costs if you're eventually going to start earning a profit on your motion picture. So the third installment, even selling $405 million worth of tickets, manages to lose money for Universal. So this is why early 2009, Rise of the Aztecs is placed on hold. And the studio, is, okay, is there another way we can do this? I mean, this was previously a profitable film franchise. So from between 2009 and 2012, there are conversations. And it's like, well, what do we do here? The Stephen Sommers movies are, well, from Sneaking into the Cinema. I mean,
Yes.
they were funny. They were, they had a kind of a goofy style.
Yeah.
I mean, they mixed horror and action and comedy. But the folks at Universal are like, well, do we do something darker and scarier? But what's fascinating, same window of time, Eric, there were also serious conversations at Universal about Stephen Sommers' Van Helsing, which again we've talked about on this podcast. Came out in May of 2004, lots of fanfare. But again, it's a Hollywood math situation. It cost 160 to 170, depending on who you talk to at Universal, and only sold 300 million worth of tickets worldwide. So that didn't even come close to breaking even. But again, the thinking at Universal, especially as they're looking over at the MCU, which had become this huge revenue stream for the Walt Disney Company, is like, oh, man, we need to do something similar with the Universal Classic Monsters. But it's like, how exactly do we go about this? And but here's Universal, and they're looking over the fence at Disney. It's like, all right, we got Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr., we got Thor with Chris Hemsworth, and Captain America with Chris Evans. And so the lesson that Universal takes away from the successes of these MCU films, it wasn't that we need to build our movie around a well-known character or a really smart script, but no, we need stars. We need, that's what we need to set this movie. That's what will bring the people in. And if I'm being completely honest, Eric, that's the exactly wrong takeaway to take from the MCU.
Yeah, I don't even think, to me, Jim, I didn't even know who Hemsworth or really Chris Evans were when they came out. I mean, I knew Robert Downey Jr. briefly. Okay.
Yep. No. You see, you're not wrong. But, this is the problem. It's like, that guy's a star. Yeah, he's a star because he was in Thor. He wasn't a star. They didn't go, oh, Chris Hemsworth. Yeah, the star, get in our movie. But again, anyway, the executives up in the Black Tower, they made up their mind. If they're now going to reboot Van Helsing or the Mummy, they're going to need a star, which is when Tom Cruise's name begins to come up in conversation. Now, Cruise had made a number of movies for Universal Pictures early on in his career. There was Legend back in 1985, and by the way, directed, big-time director, Ridley Scott. Then it was Born on the 4th of July, 1989, and that's directed by Oliver Stone.
Right.
And then we have Far and Away, 1992, and that's directed by Ron Howard, no slouch either. So but here's the thing: this is 2012. It has now been 2 decades since Cruise has last been a Universal Pictures employee. Now, mind you, he's just about to begin shooting a sci-fi movie, Oblivion, at that studio under the direction of Joseph Kosinski, who Disney fans will know, directed Tron Legacy for Disney back in 2010. More recently, F1 for Warner Brothers Pictures and Apple Original Films, one of the top grossing films of this year. So again, also no slouch. But it's while Oblivion is in production that Universal Pictures begins having conversations with Cruise about possibly making a movie at that studio that would then involve the classic Universal monsters. And but again, where this gets interesting, Eric, is that when the spectrum of possible characters are laid out in front of Cruise, what initially catches his attention is Van Helsing.
No, I mean, that's not a bad character in general. That would be the one to be like, yeah, if I want to be a cool character, Van Helsing is kind of a badass, right?
Well, that's it exactly. But what's interesting is the original Van Helsing movie, again, the one where Hugh Jackman played the title role in, that's set in 1887. And most of the action takes place in Transylvania. And supposedly the idea that intrigued Cruise was, well, what would monster hunting be like in the modern day? What sort of tools would you use? And now, more to the point, in the original Van Helsing movie, it is the Knights of the Holy Order, the secret arm of the Vatican that's supposedly protecting mankind from ultimate evil. And so, would that organization still be in operation today, or would some other group have stepped in the meantime? And, so Cruise is sort of pitching this idea, and the folks at Universal, they like it, largely because it's like, well, all right, what's interesting about that is that allows us to create, kind of the Universal Classic Monsters equivalent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right.
That organization that then backs up the Avengers and all their MCU adventures. Now, mind you, there are those at Universal who will tell you right from the get-go, they thought this was a really bad idea. Largely because they saw this as Tom Cruise turning the Universal Classic Monsters into something that he was familiar with, as in the IMF, that secret government organization behind all the adventures that Ethan Hunt and the agents in the Mission Impossible movies, they work for. But that didn't matter to the folks up in the Black Tower. They now had a star, one of the biggest in Hollywood, agreeing to help them launch their own MCU. What could possibly go wrong? As it turned out, plenty, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, this.
Optimism isn't sunshine and rainbows. It's fixing things, changing the way we fix things. It's running the world on smarter energy. Because if optimism never stops, then change can't either. GE Vernova, the energy of change.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana. Hi, I'm Jim. I'm not an actor, just a guy living with prostate cancer. My wife and I face each day head on. We asked my doctor about Xtandi enzalutamide.
Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache.
Visit Xtandi.com to watch my story.
And we're back. Okay, Eric. Again, where we left off, Universal has had its initial conversations with Tom Cruise about possibly starring in a film that would then be used to launch an MCU equivalent built around the Universal classic monsters. And by the way, these conversations began in the late winter, early spring of 2012. This is when Oblivion is being shot down in Louisiana around New Orleans and Baton Rouge. But where this gets complicated is that, well, Cruise wants to see a script before he'll commit. But also, more to the point, Cruise's dance card for the next 3 years is already pretty full. I mean, by that point, he's already agreed to appear in Edge of Tomorrow. That's a sci-fi film that Warner Brothers would release to theaters in May of 2014. There's also the fifth film in the Mission Impossible series, Rogue Nation, which Paramount wants to send into theaters July of 2015, and this would be followed by Never Go Back, which is the sequel to that Jack Reacher movie that Cruise had made for Paramount in 2012, and Never Go Back would arrive in theaters in October of 2016. So, Cruise literally lays a calendar out in front of the Universal executives and says, look, the only window of time I currently have available to do this Universal Classic Monsters movie. All right, we're looking at the early spring of 2016. And yeah, by the way, he, even if he agrees to this project, he absolutely positively has to be done with production of this project by Labor Day of that same year, 2016, because he has to honor his agreement with Paramount Pictures to then go out and help promote Jack Reacher, Never Go Back. But again, these conversations are happening in late winter, early spring of 2012, and Cruise isn't even available to begin shooting till 4 years later, early spring of 2016. So that is plenty of time to develop a screenplay, right?
You would think.
No. Cruise reportedly hates the first few scripts that Universal sends him. And again, remember, this is back when he's supposed to be starring in the reboot of Van Helsing and playing the great-grandson of the character that Hugh Jackman played in the original Van Helsing, Gabriel Van Helsing. But over this time, thinking on the movie mutates. The notion is, well, instead of having Cruise play someone who comes from this long line of monster hunters, well, wouldn't it be more interesting if over the course of this film, Cruise's character is introduced to this secret world of the monsters that live among us? And it's this version of the script where Tom Cruise is supposed to play U.S. Army Sergeant Nick Morton, a soldier of fortune who accidentally unearths the ancient tomb of the entrapped Egyptian princess Amenet. And it's this event that actually sets the whole Universal Classic Monsters version of the MCU, which now has a name, Dark Universe. This is the thing that Cruise commits to. Now, the news doesn't leak till the trades that Cruise is playing the male lead in The Mummy for Universal Pictures till November of 2015. And that name I just used, Dark Universe, 15 months earlier, July of 2014, this is when Universal revealed, we're going to do our own MCU. The Universal Classic Monsters are going to have a shared cinematic universe called Dark Universe.
Well, you were covering this at the time, Jim. Was people excited about this, or was it more feared as like a knockoff?
Well, I mean, the entertainment press definitely were intrigued by the fact that, again, Tom Cruise is sort of the A-lister of A-listers, and that, the fact that he'd committed to this, and then suddenly here was Universal talking about, well, we're going to do a movie about the Bride of Frankenstein, and Angelina Jolie has agreed to play that part, and, we're going to bring the Invisible Man into this, and, oh, hey, did we mention that Johnny Depp has agreed to play that role? And, and of course, the Bride of Frankenstein needs her groom, and we've been talking with Javier Bardem to play Frankenstein's monsters. I mean, it was one of these things where it's like, good Lord, what, look at all these stars who are lining up to be part of this new Universal Pictures Dark Universe thing. But again, it still comes down to the first film in the series. You only get that one chance to make a good first impression. And this one has to get out the door. Introduce the moviegoers around the world to the wonders of Universal's Dark Universe. And Tom Cruise, while he likes the initial script that Universal sent him, he does have some notes. Some places where you think this project screenplay could be improved. And since one of the terms of Tom Cruise's contract with the Universal Picture grants him significant creative control over this film, Universal executives have to kind of just sit back and watch as Cruise brings in a slew of screenwriters. In fact, many of whom had previously worked with him on the Mission Impossible movies. And they all begin to plus and change the script for the Mummy reboot. And Eric, with each rewrite, the role of U.S. Army Sergeant Nick Morton gets larger and larger, where Prince Amenet, the actual title character in The Mummy, her part gets smaller and smaller. And Cruise, when he's questioned about this, he says, look, long range, this is the smart thing to do. After all, his Nick Morton character in future installments of, the Universal Pictures Dark Universe films is going to have to be the modern day equivalent of Gabriel Van Helsing, a monster hunter. Yes, while the first film in this series may be titled The Mummy, it's really the origin story for his Nick Morton character. And, look, as long as Universal winds up with a big summer popcorn movie, something that connects with all four audience, quadrants, males, females, kids, old farts like myself, and that it has amazing visual effects and big action scenes. And more to the point, that if it launches the Dark Universe film franchise successfully, what's a problem?
Right.
The problem becomes apparent in early November of 2016, which is when the first teaser trailer for The Mummy arrives in theaters. By the way, this was attached to Trolls, the first film in the Trolls trilogy, and that arrives in theaters November 4th of 2016. And by the way, I want to stress, you can go on YouTube right now and watch this trailer, which has an absolutely spectacular scene where the C-130 cargo plane that Tom Cruise is traveling in with the sarcophagus of Princess Amenet begins to come apart in mid-flight and then crashes into the English countryside. Look, if you've seen this teaser, which features all sorts of footage, you ever heard of the vomit comet?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like free fall, right? Where like it's gravity.
There we go. I mean, they shot a lot of the scenes, for example, for Apollo 13, when they're supposed to be floating inside of the lunar module and the command module aboard this thing. So same thing. They set up a cargo area, and there's all this amazing footage of Tom Cruise and other people, sort of floating around inside of this space. And people who saw this trailer was like, oh my God, that ad is amazing. That looks like an incredibly entertaining Mission Impossible movies. On the other hand, a Mummy movie, I don't know about that. And that, in hindsight, is what really tripped up Universal Pictures' launch of its Dark Universe film franchise. They hired Tom Cruise because they thought, the studio, that in order to properly launch this thing, they needed an A-lister. But again, to get Cruise to commit to the project and 4 years of working on the script, they had to give him creative control. And once he had that, well, Cruise then changed The Mummy into the sort of movie that he had previously made, something that he knew Tom Cruise fans would really enjoy, and that was a Mission Impossible film. And again, you only get one shot at making a first impression. So when the Mummy reboot arrives in theaters in June of 2017 and underperforms, this is when Universal Picture realizes that, we can't go forward with this. We botched the introduction. That we made a Tom Cruise movie, and that's great. But we were supposed to be launching a film franchise built around our Universal classic monsters, and the Mummy really didn't do right by Princess Amenet. Now there are still folks within the Universal organization who continue to champion the Dark Universe idea. And this, of course, includes the talented folks over at Universal Creative, the ones who create all the rides, shows, and attractions for the theme parks at the Universal destinations and experience what they operate. And so this is how we wind up with Dark Universe, the land in Epic Universe, which opens in May of this year, 2025, and featured a reimagined version of the Universal Classic Monsters. And you yourself, Eric, have just repeatedly enthused about, this side of the park. I mean, especially
my favorite land, my favorite attraction, many people's favorite attraction. It's top level. So it was kind of surprising that they would make it after knowing that their failed reboot attempts, and a lot of times the movies kind of mirror what's going into theme parks, and this seemed like we're going to take a gamble. But then again, I believe Steven Spielberg made this request, didn't he? We'll find out in the epic story.
There we go.
In February.
All right. Yes, but a 3-part documentary. But it's important to stress here, Tom Cruise was not necessarily wrong. That, look, this guy, just in the past 3 years, I mean, think about it. Everybody else in the industry was like, you're going to make a sequel to Top Gun? The movie from 1986, what are you? You're in your 50s? It's like, no one's going to go to that movie. And Tom reached out to Joseph Kaczynski, who, remember, he made Oblivion with for Universal, and got Paramount to put up $170 million. And again, same thing, was hands-on with every aspect of the script and who they were casting, and, the exact same thing he did on The Mummy. This time around, that movie comes out, May of 2022, makes $1.4 billion.
Yeah. That was crazy.
And Cruise to this day insists, it's like, look, I gave you a hit movie. You blew the promotion. If you'd figured out the proper way to promote that thing, we'd be 6 films into, a Dark Universe at this point. This isn't my fault. I gave you a commercial movie. You guys couldn't figure out how to promote it. But anyway, there we go. And I have to say, just based on how enthusiastic Eric has been about Dark Universe, I mean, next week, Len and Jim Shul and I are down for IAPA, and the last 2 days I'm in town, Mr. Shul and I are going over and spending all of our time at Epic Universe. I want to see this park.
You know what I want to see, Jim? I want to see the pictures of you, Jim, Shul, and Len after your monster makeup experience. You can be the 3 customers of the day.
Oh, well, there we go. The problem is that, you've seen me. I have a face for radio. I'm going to step into this makeup experience. It's like, no, sir, you're done. Just to go back. I think we did some lovely work there.
Yeah, you're coming back for your second time today, sir.
There we go. Coming in for touch-ups. No. It's like,
what's funny, Jim, and I'm really interested in. I promise you guys, we're going to have a recap show of Jim's experience at Epic. I think everybody should be interested in hearing how you do it. But I will tell you, Jim, I think that they could do a reverse order here. like a Pirates of the Caribbean attraction turns into an actual movie. I think they do wonderful storytelling in the Frankenstein experiment. Basically, they have Victoria Frankenstein as their main guy, and she already has like the greatest hits of the monsters. Why not do the Avengers movie style first? Make this movie, and then you can have them all spread out based off of this character. I'll be interested to see if they could turn that, and they can do it the reverse order. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful attraction. Lovely, in my opinion. It had me intrigued on what this story is, but I'm interested in what you think, and we'll probably talk about that in then this month. As soon as you come back, we're going to talk about it.
There we go. And if there are any Universal insiders out there, if somebody could slip me the light bill for, Monsters Unchained, the Frankenstein experiment. I mean, I've just seen that footage of the, people walking through the queue with the, it's like,
it's awesome.
Oh my God.
I'm excited, Jim. I'm excited for you to experience this land, and hopefully you'll go hang out with Igor and the Invisible Man and get to see, hopefully the Blade will be back and burning.
Well, there we go.
Super excited. I'm excited on your behalf.
Well, and so am I. And again, I will report in once I get back. But for now, that's going to do it for this week with the Epic Universal Podcast. And if you have topics or suggestions for upcoming shows, as something that you'd like Eric and I to talk about, feel free to send those along through social media, or you can contact me directly at jimhillmedia.com. Okay, and with that, thanks again for listening, folks. And Mr. Hersey and I will be back next week.